Hi everyone. Sorry I haven't really posted anything since my last video. Will become apparent. But this is the first in a few videos. I'm not sure how many. Depends. Just depends how it goes, really. I'll be posting after the event. But I have a medical tribunal coming up. It's early hours of Saturday morning at the minute. And it's this coming Thursday. I mentioned before in a video that it recently come to my attention about this thing of childhood trauma and how it changes the development of the brain, but how there's a lot of hope for recovery or repair from that, because there's a lot based in neuroplasticity, and they have a lot of good ideas about, I don't know, remoulding the brain and the patterns of thought. Basically, just want to share, in the abyss moment, or in the mire, my brain's thinking a million to the dozen. Because although I did reach out for help by the lady actually who introduced me to the possibility that this is maybe what my major issue is, which after a kind of shock phase made a lot more sense, because I've done the work, I've done the education, I've done the retraining the brain and stepping outside my comfort zone and analysing my ugly truths and all the things that, any good psychotherapist or psychologist will try. And let me be clear, not for 1 minute do I think any of it were a waste of time. It's necessary, and I've learned so much, and some things have really been a benefit to me. But the frustration I've felt in still not being able to function in some respects has become much more massive, because it's never made any sense to me until I've come across this. So now something that I'm sort of only just coming to terms with, that has good prospects. And because although this lady helped me, it's her job to be able to talk me through what to say in the circumstance that's going to be coming up. She wrote me sort of like as if I were writing it, and told me to go through it and edit it and tell what I thought, which is absolutely crazy, because the reason I needed her help is because if I had them kind of ability to process something, especially when it's attaches personally to me, if I could do what she was asking me to do, I wouldn't have needed her help in the first place. But I have no resentment to that, because she's not, her job is to do what her job is. Her job is not to retrain my brain to be able to do that. She literally has done all that she can. So with one thing and another, basically, the only thing, apart from the obvious, where it doesn't tally, where what they've wrote doesn't tally, and it's just some ridiculous comments that have been written in my medical assessment. Well, the decision makers' comments about that I've written about 3 poems because it's a way to vent. So it stops me picking my face. It's just another way to vent. You made a comment of something about me being able to be productive because I write poetry. I mean, talk about left brain, right brain, and just the lack, well, the amount of ignorance that someone whose job is tasked to understand these things could write something so lacking in insight. Bearing all this in mind, because I know, Mill, call it what you want, I know that under the terms of what is classed as having an illness that is debilitating and stops me being able to integrate normal life, and that I need support with, it's not even a question in my mind, even though there's issues of guilt, and you know, it's not something I ever wanted to do anyway, was claim sickness benefits. Because I convinced myself, what if I get used to the money, I'll never get better. But when I first ever did get them, it was the first time I actually felt empowered enough to actually go try and do a course on Introduction to Counselling, which was absolutely amazing and fascinating. But what I didn't understand at the time was that you basically are the whole group is self-therapizing, and it was far too much, far too triggering, far too emotional, and I've begun to get really, really agoraphobic again. But, you know, everything's a learning curve. Anyway, it's not going to stop me thinking over and over again, because that's what I do, you know. I may have this that stops me being able to function in life, and this neuroplasticity thing, but I'm also very deep and profound thinker, and you know, I'm very intelligent, and in some respects, you know, they're fantastic qualities. And if I can finally get these techniques and do this, be able to function in normal life, I mean, the way that I think is going to be key to everything, because I've got so much knowledge, so much understanding of of how complex we are, that if I can manage to function day to day, I have a real opportunity to find a huge purpose and be able to, as you say, turn my lead into gold. Because that's what you do with trauma. You know, if you don't raise trauma, you can't raise trauma. Trauma is an experience. If you deny your trauma, you're up shit creek anyway. If you can use that trauma for good, it kind of counts it, kind of neutralise it, like acids and alkaline, yin yang, two sides of the same coin. But anyway, what I've decided is, for better or for worse, I'm going to take the paperwork in with me and point out the obvious, you know, inconsistencies with the actual decision maker's decision itself, and explain that there was even some information I couldn't address because they were unable to tell me if they had the information. As usual, a complete red tape shit show. But I guess the main point is explaining to someone else why I'm like who I am. It's almost not really understandable in normal terms to myself, because I don't think in normal terms, which is a little uncomfortable to realise. It's not like I'm irrational. It's just that there's actually a lot more. It goes a lot deeper than that. It's to do with fight or flight and responses that I literally don't have the ability, regardless of any therapy that I've done, currently have any ability to have control over, much to my confusion for many years. But I suppose the closest I can get to conveying that is just to speak, just to tell them the reality, the truth of my reality. I don't know if it's going to sound crazy or made up or fantastical, because it's kind of does sound like that way to me, but that's my rational brain, and the fact that I'm, intelligent, the fact that I do understand psychological processes, the fact that it didn't work, but I mean, I have a real answer to why now, but it's kind of all sort of new to me, and I'm going to have to try and explain that to these people. At this point, though, I mean, if I don't win the case, I don't win the case. Only life, fate, the future, can answer what's going to happen. That's just how it is. But I cannot wait for this to be over. I cannot wait for this to be over. I'm feeling very, very manic, very up and down, very conflicted, in an not impossible situation, but without being dramatic, I sometimes think, if I could get through this and just have a couple of years to relax and be able to not be stressing about day-to-day things, because I've got this I'm buffeted from having to function like a normal social human being, because I can't, and because I've spent so many years surviving, living like this, I've almost created a safety net that's now, it's like the tower in a pack of tarot cards, the walls that protect, the walls that have, that I've built a strong protection. The walls like stopping me integrating, I guess. But it's a real opportunity for me to become something. I mean, if this is the final key to this very long, very tiring, very immersed, confusing, frustrating, traumatic, enlightening, all the possible emotions and thoughts and experiences you can think to have just in the confines of a human brain. I mean, if this is the answer, if this is the final, if this is, the like that last piece that makes everything else build a picture, then this inordinate amount of difficulty that many situations seem to have even brought ridiculous amounts of difficulty regardless of me, it's almost like a gift. It's almost, it's the way I've got to see it. If you don't see it that way, people think this ridiculous term depression, which when you think of political correctness and the fact that it's a clinical term and all that, is such a... Why they still use that term, I don't know. It's a ridiculous term just to describe a certain vibe of a group of certain kinds of mental conditions. It's very silly, but anyway. So, because I've posted for a while and I've not felt the ability to, but this is obviously something that might help other people at this time. I thought it'd be a good idea to post. I'm probably not going to post any of these videos until after it's happened and the outcome. I'm not sure yet, but I also want to highlight again that if anybody feels like they've done all this work for mental health and, you know, they've had depression, my major condition, my most persistent condition after waking up one day having had a nervous breakdown, which is very different to a mental breakdown. And they feel like they've done all the work and nothing's working. I just want to point out that someone who has read a lot, learned a lot, looked at the ugly truths, you know, literally tried many things and they don't understand why these things aren't working, need to really look at this new, well, it's probably not new, but for some reason evaded me, this thing about like it's almost like a brain injury. It's like the way your brain's developed. So we're not talking like intellectual disability, as in brain. You know, you've been born with a brain disability or an inability to compute stuff. It's literally like how your brain's developed through trauma, to do with, you know, the brain's a very clever thing. When a child is traumatized, they can't process, so the brain will take over to protect them, because that's what the brain does. It's very interlinked with your body and how that reacts. And rather than, you know, there's a saying as well that seems to go with it, which is the body remembers what the brain doesn't. And there's terms that I've seen which have started making much more sense to myself, which is things like the freeze response, the fight or flight response. It just slowly, it's like the slowest penny drops, which I did have prior to that, when, you know, because everything counts. We are creatures of the mind. Nothing exists outside the mind. Without the mind, there is nothing, is there? Everything's to do with the mind. So, you know, from every angle that you can learn and educate yourself, it's all relevant. But I would like to point out that, you know, if it's not something you've ever looked into, look into it. Think of it in terms of neurology. So we're not talking just emotional and psychological conditions, and we're not talking how your brain, how, you know, having some kind of dysfunction of your brain when you were born, or any kind of, you know, initial cognitive thing, although it is cognitive, everything's cognitive, but about this thing of childhood trauma and how your brain develops. And it develops wrong, so you're not able to deal with things that most other people can, and you have responses that often don't even make sense to you, particularly if you've done the work and that isn't working. And, you know, really 99% of the time it should. And then you start questioning yourself, and then guilt and confusion and all these things. Try having a look at this. It was actually a little bit of a headshot for me when I realised, because it was introduced to me in the terms of, you know, childhood trauma causes brain damage. So your ego's instantly like, wait, what? But it's not quite like that. I just have not had the wherewithal. The focus is not a great thing from me. And when I do start thinking about things, you know, my brain goes off at rate of knots onto all sorts of kinds of tangent. You know, I've had to create things to entertain my busy brain because I've not had the social aspect. I've not been able to fill it up literally physically and interactively. And the more you learn about yourself, the more you want to know. So it's like you're craving, my brain's craving all this input and knowledge and understanding. And there's nothing day to day to distract it, because I've learned to protect myself from all those things and try and function in a world that I don't. My instincts find counterintuitive and I don't belong in, if that makes sense. The outlook is really promising. Really promising. I really don't know enough about it. I've not gone into it. I can't. It's too much. It's overloaded at the minute. There's too many immediate things pressing. And one of the things that I have tried to do is learn. It's so difficult. Learn to do things in order of when they're going to come. Otherwise, I overthink. It hasn't stopped me overthinking. I can't stop overthinking until I really take a deep dive and step into looking into this new thing. But there are a lot of practical exercises by the looks of it, and things that you can do that don't involve emotions, and I mean, it's about neuroplasticity. I guess the closest thing I can think of is, although I'm not sure of how it works in the scientific sense, is brain training. Games that they have on computers and phones, or I don't know, maybe you can buy books, like quizzes or exercises, and these can literally, there's some really clever people out there, neurologists, because neurology is the key to everything, I think, these days. It's kind of been the missing science between psychology and basic anatomy, the biology of the brain. It's kind of the joint that connects the two. But they seem to have learned a lot about it, and the prognosis is good. If I manage to get to Thursday without committing harry-carry, that's another reason I'm making this is, because I really want other people to hear this, in the sense that this might be something that you can use. And if you think you know something, or I've learned something that someone else can get a use out of, I'm all about that. Recycling, if you like. Plus, when I have been a bit more able and cognitive, I might not be able to function in the outside world, but I've been trying to learn about getting me inside voices out, and I understand the therapeutic elements that it gives me, and it's just good. It's good for me. I need to do this so much. I may be able to, from doing this, sometimes it's sort of the cacophony, the just outrageous roar of competing voices and ideas, and, that background song that's always said, it's crazy when, people have a conscious voice and then a subconscious voice, and maybe a couple of I really can't wait to teach mine to queue up and have a level of volume appropriate to whoever stand in the queue, because I can't do that. But there are certain things that silence some of them and give me so I can kind of exhale a little. It's still probably very crazy to some other people if they were inside my head, but to me it's a bit of light relief, and getting it outside does help that. So I like to have a few purposes to do something. It motivates me a little bit more to do it. So